On the outside, Elliot and Sophia Caldwell's life was a picture of wealth, success, and perfect domesticity. Their sprawling house in a prestigious suburban neighborhood in Wellesley, Massachusetts, was a testament to their hard work and status. A perfect lawn, manicured hedges, and a gleaming white facade were the first things anyone noticed when they approached their property. Elliot, 37, was a senior investment manager with a reputation for precision and success, while Sophia, 35, was a pharmaceutical researcher who had made waves in her field with innovative work on drug delivery systems. Their seemingly perfect appearance extended beyond their home and into every aspect of their lives. They were the golden couple, the envy of their neighbors, admired for their accomplishments, impeccable taste, and sleek lifestyle. The life Elliot and Sophia lived was marked by rigid schedules and unyielding professionalism. Both were extremely dedicated to their careers, working long hours with little room for anything else. Elliot would leave the house at exactly 7:30 a.m. in his dark blue Mercedes, the same time every morning, while Sophia, after a quiet breakfast, would retreat to her home office for hours of research and pharmaceutical studies. Their workdays often stretched late into the evening, and their weekends were filled with business trips, conferences, and networking events. Their social calendar was filled with high-end dinner parties where they rubbed elbows with other successful professionals. They appeared to have everything: money, success, status, but underneath this facade, their personal lives were barren. They avoided domestic clutter by avoiding domestic intimacy, and more importantly, the chaos of raising children. To the outside world, the Caldwells appeared to have achieved the pinnacle of success. Their home in Wellesley, Massachusetts, was a sprawling estate that seemed to embody everything people aspired to: beautifully landscaped gardens, a grand entrance with a marble staircase, and the latest in luxury decor. Elliot and Sophia's public personas were also pristine. They were the go-to couple for high society functions, always impeccably dressed, their conversations intelligent and engaging. At social gatherings, they exuded charm and success. However, beneath the glossy surface, their marriage was one of convenience rather than passion, and their lives were increasingly consumed by a relentless pursuit of achievement and wealth, leaving no room for genuine connection. Their perfect lives were merely a facade, a calculated construction to mask the cracks in their relationship and the hollowness they both felt inside. Elliot's upbringing shaped him into the driven, pragmatic man he became. Born into a middle-class family in Connecticut, he was always aware of the importance of success. His father, a tax attorney, was stern and believed that hard work and ambition would guarantee success. Elliot attended prestigious private schools where academic achievement was prized, and his natural talents in mathematics and business were quickly recognized. He went on to Dartmouth College, where his desire to succeed turned into a burning obsession. From there, Elliot's career path led him into investment management, where his cold, analytical approach to finance earned him rapid promotions. Sophia's story was similarly one of high expectations and excellence. Raised in a family of academics, her father a physics professor and her mother a biochemist, Sophia was encouraged to excel in science from an early age. She was a prodigy in her field, winning awards in high school and eventually earning a spot at MIT. Her intelligence, ambition, and passion for research fueled her rise in the pharmaceutical industry, where she became known for her innovative drug delivery systems. Both Elliot and Sophia were used to being at the top of their respective fields, their drive and work ethic a reflection of their upbringings, where success was not an option but a requirement. Elliot and Sophia's paths crossed at a pharmaceutical investment conference in 1995, where their intellectual and professional ambitions aligned. Elliot, by then an experienced investor, was scouting for cutting-edge opportunities in the biotech sector, while Sophia was presenting her research on new drug delivery methods. They bonded over their shared passion for combining business and science, recognizing that their careers could benefit from one another's expertise. The chemistry between them was instantaneous, both professionally and personally. Their mutual respect for each other's intellect and ambition quickly turned into a romantic connection. Within 6 months, they were married, creating a power couple that combined financial prowess with scientific innovation. Their marriage, however, was always centered on their careers, and the idea of children never entered their minds. When Elliot and Sophia first married, they both viewed their professional ambitions as the core focus of their lives. They agreed early on that children would not be part of their plans. For Sophia, the decision was rooted in her career-driven mindset. As a rising star in the pharmaceutical industry, she felt that motherhood would be a hindrance to her intense work schedule and desire for intellectual growth. She wanted to push the boundaries of her field without the distractions that a child might bring. Elliot shared similar sentiments. Coming from a background where his father placed high expectations on him, Elliot felt he could never meet those expectations while raising children. His own childhood had been one of strict discipline, and the idea of taking on the responsibilities of parenthood felt burdensome to him. Both found comfort in this decision, which allowed them to remain laser-focused on their professional lives, travel without concern, and immerse themselves fully in their high-status social circles. They were a couple defined by their careers, their wealth, and the freedom that came from being childless. While their decision not to have children allowed them to flourish professionally, it created a slow-burning emotional emptiness that neither could fully acknowledge. The years passed, and although they continued to climb the social and professional ladder, their personal lives started to feel increasingly hollow. At first, the void wasn't obvious. Luxury and success masked the growing discontent, but as their careers became more demanding, the couple's emotional connection weakened. Sophia was often consumed by her work in the lab or board meetings, while Elliot's attention was firmly on his investments and financial strategies. Even when they were together, there was a palpable lack of warmth between them, a silence that hung in the air during their meals and quiet evenings at home. They spent their time attending events and mingling with society's elite, but there was no emotional depth to these interactions. Slowly, both Elliot and Sophia started to realize that, despite their success, they were increasingly isolated from each other. They were two highly successful individuals, but they were no longer partners in the traditional sense. They were simply sharing space, each lost in their own world. The sense of fulfillment they once sought in their careers began to feel less satisfying, and they started to wonder if there was something more to life than just professional victories. The initial signs of their descent into darker paths were subtle but growing. It began with a general sense of dissatisfaction, a feeling that their perfectly curated lives were becoming monotonous. Elliot, always looking for the next big thing, began to explore new territories, searching for ways to fill the growing emptiness. He discovered online spaces that allowed him to escape the confines of his ordinary life. Sophia too became curious. What started as a search for intellectual stimulation in places where they could be anonymous soon turned into something more disturbing. Elliot found himself drawn to forums on the dark web, while Sophia started engaging in less conventional discussions about human behavior, morality, and power dynamics. They were bored, seeking thrills, and finding themselves enticed by forbidden knowledge. As they dug deeper into these online communities, their dissatisfaction with their reality began to manifest in increasingly risky behaviors. The things that once seemed taboo became seductive, and what had begun as an intellectual curiosity soon spiraled into a shared obsession. As Elliot and Sophia's boredom with their high society life and sterile routine grew, they found themselves seeking deeper and darker forms of entertainment. Their exploration began innocently, looking for ways to indulge their intellectual curiosities without being bound by the rules of the conventional world. At first, it was about accessing obscure knowledge, rare books, forbidden philosophies, and scientific research that was difficult to obtain through legitimate means. But the more they delved into these shadowy corners of the internet, the more their curiosity grew, leading them into the darker underworld of the internet, the dark web. It started with encrypted chat rooms and obscure forums where topics like conspiracy theories, financial loopholes, and illicit trade were discussed. Elliot, always looking for opportunities, initially investigated ways to make more money anonymously, exploring cryptocurrencies and black market business dealings, but soon their discussions turned toward more taboo subjects. The couple, bored with their predictable lives, became fascinated with the morally ambiguous worlds they discovered: underground markets, illegal auctions, and most disturbingly, human trafficking. They marveled at the power that could be wielded from the shadows, the ability to manipulate situations without consequences. It wasn't long before their fascination morphed into a compulsion, and the idea of control and dominance over another human being consumed them. Sophia, always the intellectual, became intrigued by the psychology of the people who participated in these illicit acts. What drove people to exploit others so cruelly? What kind of power did they hold? The more she explored these darker spaces, the more the idea of controlling and owning another human began to excite her. She wasn't interested in mere knowledge anymore. She wanted to experience the power firsthand. Both of them were drawn to the anonymity and forbidden allure of these networks, and they began to entertain increasingly dangerous ideas. As the Caldwells' interests and activities grew darker, they realized they needed to have a private, controlled space in which they could fully indulge their desires without anyone finding out. The luxurious, sprawling house they lived in was perfect for their needs, but it lacked the hidden sanctum they craved, and so the basement became the perfect place for their dark experimentations. They began transforming the basement into a high-tech prison. They installed soundproof walls, reinforced the doors with steel frames, and outfitted the space with hidden cameras and microphones to ensure they could keep constant surveillance over anyone who was confined there. They didn't just want a place to hide their victim, they wanted a fortress, a space where no one could hear or see anything that happened. Every inch of the room was meticulously planned to serve their purposes. They replaced the old, unfinished basement with a chillingly sophisticated space, equipped with expensive furniture, a flat-screen television, and luxuries that would serve to maintain the illusion of comfort. But beneath the surface, the space was a carefully orchestrated cage. They even went so far as to install complex locking mechanisms, ensuring that once their captive was in the basement, there was no chance of escape. It was in this secluded, high-tech environment that the Caldwells would carry out their twisted desires and satisfy their craving for control. The basement was no longer a basement, it had become their dark sanctuary, a place where they could manipulate, abuse, and dominate without fear of discovery. By the time they reached the final stages of their plan, Elliot and Sophia Caldwell had fully committed themselves to the dark path they had chosen. The basement transformation was complete, and every detail had been meticulously planned to ensure that their captive would have no chance of escape. But this phase was more than just about securing the physical space. It was about finalizing the logistics of their control over Amara. The Caldwells understood that once Amara arrived, the illusion of luxury they intended to project would be essential to keeping her compliant. They wanted to convince her that she was not a victim of trafficking, but instead a privileged guest in their home, a woman chosen for her beauty and intelligence, given the chance of a new life. They crafted this narrative carefully, knowing that it would keep Amara confused and off balance in the beginning. They reassured themselves that it would be a slow process of indoctrination, manipulating her until she became utterly dependent on them. Elliot was particularly focused on logistics. He made arrangements for the delivery of their victim, ensuring that the transportation was as smooth and discreet as possible. Sophia, on the other hand, worked on psychological strategies to keep Amara docile. She studied books on mind control and human behavior, devising ways to isolate her emotionally from any hope of escape or rescue. Both of them had their roles, and they were prepared to execute their plan with cold precision. As the time approached for Amara's arrival, a palpable tension filled the air. They were excited but also anxious about what would happen when their carefully constructed world collided with the reality of having another person under their control. They knew that Amara's arrival would mark the start of a new chapter, one in which their deepest desires would finally be realized. The day Amara arrived, the Caldwells' carefully crafted illusion began to take shape. She was transported under heavy sedation, drugged to keep her unaware of her true destination. She was told that she was being brought to a safe place where she would be cared for, her future carefully planned out by the Caldwells. At first she was disoriented but unaware of the horrors that awaited her. The couple took great care in ensuring that her arrival would be smooth and unremarkable, no red flags that would alert her to the reality of what was happening. When Amara woke up, she was in a lavishly furnished room with soft lighting and beautiful decor, which initially gave her a sense of comfort. The house itself was grand, a symbol of the wealth and status the Caldwells had achieved over the years. Elliot and Sophia greeted her with practiced warmth, offering her food, soft drinks, and a sense of false security. They kept the conversation light, introducing themselves as kind benefactors who wanted to offer her a better life. Despite their outward kindness, Amara felt something was off. There was a constant unease in the air, a sense that she wasn't free to move about the house as she wished. She was given a luxurious but restrictive room, and the Caldwells were always present or watching through surveillance. The tension in her chest grew with each passing passing moment, but she didn't know how to articulate her suspicions or escape. For the Caldwells, this was the beginning of their long-awaited experiment. They felt a surge of excitement mixed with control as they witnessed Amara's reactions to her new environment. However, they were careful not to push too far, too fast. The illusion had to be maintained, and the process of breaking Amara down mentally would take time. When Amara first arrived at the Caldwell mansion, she was swept into a world of extravagance and comfort that seemed like a dream. The mansion was a grandiose structure, filled with expensive art, luxurious furniture, and meticulously designed rooms. At first glance, it appeared to be the perfect place for someone seeking refuge or a fresh start. The Caldwells made sure she experienced the best of everything: gourmet meals, beautifully crafted clothing, a lavish bed, and all the material comforts she could ask for. They made it clear that she was to be treated as a guest, given every luxury to show their generosity. However, as the days wore on, the facade began to crumble. While the material world around her was one of opulence, Amara quickly realized the truth. She was a prisoner in a gilded cage. The Caldwells controlled every aspect of her life, from when she woke up to when she went to sleep. The walls of her luxury room began to feel like the bars of a cell, and the fine clothes and food couldn't mask the underlying truth of her captivity. Though the mansion was beautiful, it was isolating. She wasn't allowed to leave the house or interact with anyone outside the Caldwells' direct control. The couple kept her under surveillance, and every move she made was monitored. The illusion of a pampered, free existence quickly turned into a nightmare, as she was subtly stripped of autonomy. What had appeared to be a dream life was, in reality, a well-crafted illusion to keep her subdued and compliant. The beautiful mansion became a trap, and the luxury she was given was just another way of controlling her. As Amara's days stretched into weeks, a rigid, suffocating routine began to take hold. The Caldwells' control over her life was tight and deliberate. She was woken up at a set time every morning, served breakfast, and then told what to do for the rest of the day. Each hour was planned out in advance. She had to read certain books, watch certain films, and engage in conversations that were carefully orchestrated by Sophia and Elliot. They kept her isolated, ensuring that she had no connection to the outside world. There were no phone calls, no letters, no visits, nothing that might remind her of her life before. The tension within the Caldwell household began to grow. Elliot, the more volatile of the two, became increasingly paranoid and controlling. His obsession with maintaining complete power over Amara started to manifest in fits of rage when things didn't go according to plan. Any deviation from their expectations, whether it was Amara showing signs of rebellion or an issue with the logistics of her captivity, set him off. His temper flared, and the psychological pressure he exerted on her grew more intense. Sophia, the more calculated and reserved partner, began to show signs of strain as well. She had been the mastermind behind the plan, the one who had coldly plotted out every detail, but now the weight of her actions was beginning to take a toll on her. She began to question if the risks of keeping Amara locked away were worth the strain it was placing on her marriage. Their growing distrust of each other, fueled by jealousy and paranoia, started to erode the stability of the household. Amara, ever observant, could feel the mounting tension. The Caldwells, once a united front, were slowly falling apart, and she began to sense that their control over her and each other was slipping. Despite the rigid routine, Amara saw cracks in the facade, and she began to recognize that the tension between the couple was as much a tool of their dominance as it was a weakness. For Amara, the constant pressure only reinforced her resolve to survive. She would not let them break her. Although Amara was physically confined, she was far from broken. In fact, the isolation gave her the time and space to observe, think, and plan. Her quiet strength grew over time. She wasn't loud or overt in her resistance. Instead, she cultivated patience, knowing that her opportunity would come. Amara's ability to endure the psychological and emotional strain placed on her by the Caldwells was extraordinary. She began to read the situation more acutely, understanding the inner dynamics of the Caldwells' marriage and their psychological states. She knew that Elliot's emotional instability and Sophia's growing doubts about their plan were vulnerabilities she could exploit. Instead of rebelling or making desperate attempts to escape, both of which would have been disastrous, Amara took a more measured approach. She became compliant, responding to the Caldwells with just the right amount of passivity to keep them from suspecting that she was mentally plotting her own escape. She also worked on building subtle alliances, using her intelligence and empathy to gain the Caldwells' trust and lower their guards. Her quiet strength was in her ability to keep her emotions in check, not to react when provoked, and to act when the time was right. Over time, she began to see moments where the Caldwells' control was less certain, and she realized that the power dynamic between them was starting to shift. The cracks in their empire were becoming more visible, and Amara began to see a way out, not through force but through strategy and the manipulation of their own weaknesses. The fall of the Caldwell Empire came swiftly, but it was the result of months of careful observation, planning, and psychological warfare. Amara, using her quiet strength and intellect, was able to exploit the vulnerabilities of her captors. She had gathered evidence of their trafficking operations, their illegal activities, and the dark truths they tried to hide from the outside world. She had carefully documented the abusive conditions she was subjected to, and she had secretly reached out to a trusted contact who could help her once the time was right. One fateful day, as the tensions between Elliot and Sophia reached their breaking point, Amara's chance arrived. She set the plan into motion by sending the collected evidence to law enforcement. The tip-off was anonymous, but the authorities moved quickly to investigate the Caldwell household. The evidence was overwhelming, and the truth of the Caldwell's crimes was exposed to the public. When the authorities arrived at the mansion to arrest Elliot and Sophia, it was a spectacle of ruin. The couple's wealth, their influence, and their carefully curated public image were shattered in an instant. Their once grand empire was revealed for what it truly was, a house built on lies, abuse, and exploitation. Elliot and Sophia Caldwell were arrested and charged with multiple crimes, including human trafficking, unlawful imprisonment, and abuse. They were both sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The media frenzy that followed painted a chilling picture of the Caldwells' descent from high society to criminal infamy. The world that they had so meticulously constructed was torn down, and the shocking truth about their dark activities was laid bare for all to see. As for Amara, she was finally free. Her testimony was instrumental in bringing down the Caldwells, and she received the help she needed to begin rebuilding her life. Although she was deeply scarred by her experience, she emerged from captivity as a survivor, stronger, wiser, and determined to reclaim her future. The fall of the Caldwell Empire marked the end of their reign of terror and the beginning of Amara's journey toward healing and justice.